Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent. So today we're going to talk about what works in public procurement in terms of leadership in the office. We have several folks in the native app with us to have that conversation. And we also have Carol Wilson, who is retiring from public service imminently to go celebrate grandchildren, I think. So you'll have to tell us what your plans are. So we wanted to involve her in this conversation before we allowed her to dip gracefully to the exit. Carol, why don't you introduce yourself to this room since you aren't in the native app and let people know kind of what you're doing, and then we'll kick into the conversation.
Thanks, Dustin. Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Wilson. I'm currently, until tomorrow, the Director of Procurement for the state of Connecticut. Procurement has been my career for the last 36 years, started out 15 years in private and the last 24 in public procurement. After a really rewarding career, my husband and I have decided to hit the career finish line and retire. We have lots of plans with our family, my parents who are blessedly still with us, my kids, grandkids, and then we are campers and we are fisher people, and we're going to do a lot of that. And when the pandemic leaves us, perhaps travel farther places without the camper.
That's wonderful. So we're talking today about what it means to lead in a public procurement office. And so I'll kick off the conversation, and just so that we can context, I'm going to I want to run the conversation for the half hour, and then we can celebrate Carol at the end, and then we can take any questions from folks who have. So I was just on a call with a large county, and they were talking about the importance of we were talking about the difference between purchasing and procurement, where purchasing is the activity of managing the transactions, but then procurement is all the things that wrap around the transaction mill in order to make procurement be a strategic asset. So, Jaime, you run a state. So how do you try to keep your procurement office strategic, and what works for you from a leadership perspective?
Most days I just try to get in enough coffee to help me get through the end of the day, to be a little bit honest. But so I've been in this role since 2017, and I'm managing anywhere. I think the procurement office is 21 people, but I have other groups on the side that I also have a focus on. So I'm anywhere from 80 to 100 people that I'm managing and leading on a daily basis. And I think that's the first place that I want to start, is that there's a difference between managing and leading, right? So a good leader has a vision. A good leader is able to drive the team towards the finish line and then recreate another finish line. And you have open-mindedness as you start to get towards getting to know your team and growing towards some of those different visions. You've got confidence, honesty, right? And so it's all the things that we've talked about on these Clubhouse chats. It's collaboration, but this is a little bit different collaboration. It's collaboration with your team and the stakeholders in the procurement process, which in my particular state, right, it could be the governor, it could be the commissioner, it's the executives in state government. So I think first and foremost, it's understanding the difference between a working manager versus a leader, and that you're leading a team and people, and that you've got to build the relationship with your team so that they trust you, not with like a whip and like, you're making them follow you, but it's a matter of trust and lead.
Carol, what have you found that worked for you in your long career? How did you try to build leadership and build leaders inside of your organization? And then we'll come back to folks in the app.
Yeah, so some of it is instinctive. You can always tell certain people who have that natural leadership ability, whether it's their enthusiasm, they're volunteering for more work, they're helping others, things of that nature. And so those ones, are naturally evolve. And I try and support those types of people in getting them to where they want to be. But as a whole, in my job in government procurement, we all know there's bureaucracy associated with working in a public sector and many laws that govern your work. So the strategic approach and finding a way to yes within the constraints of the laws were part of my focus. And I tried to embed that attitude into our staff. It's so all too easy to say, no, this law says I can't do this. And find creative ways to have your staff look at, what's being asked of you, what we're dealing with the laws, and find a solution. So those are some things that I've instilled, and that change. The other important thing is change. Things don't always get better because of change, but they never get better without it. Accept the change. Use it as an opportunity to better your skills, better your processes, and create efficiencies. And throughout, that's the mindset I create. And a lot of people, I found that my staff embrace that. Integrity, ethics are all important part of being a respected leader. And there's much, much more. But again, those are some of the things that work well for me.
So for those of you who are in the app and wondering why I sound like Carol Wilson, it's because we had Carol Wilson join us in a Zoom call. So we're blending a Zoom and a Clubhouse since Carol isn't in the app. And Carol is retiring in a couple of days after how many years of service for the state of Connecticut, Carol?
24.
24. So we're forcing her to put her voice on audio before she goes off to petunias and Harleys, I would hope. So if you guys have questions, we'll bring some people up towards the end of the half hour. We record the first half hour for a podcast for people who aren't in the app. And so please feel free to think of a question that you may have. So Jenny, Kristen, Jonathan, one of you guys want to jump in on how you find what you find works from creating leadership opportunities and how to make procurement be strategic through your leadership?
I can jump in. This is Jenny. I'm risk counsel for the Office of the Comptroller, and we're in Massachusetts, and we're on kind of the back end of the procurement. Our procurement office has a really a terrific leader, Gary Lambert, and the Massachusetts focus was really on building best value, not getting kind of tied up in knots with the rules, but really focusing on two things, which is being able to achieve success operationally, which is what is your mission, but also having the undercurrent of fiscal responsibility, which is what governments have to do. We have to be fiscally responsible for our decisions. And on our end, we're on the audit end and accounting. So when we're audited, they're going to go back and look at the decisions that were made to see if they were fiscally responsible and if you achieved your success. So building that in from the front end definitely carries over into the audit end. So I think communication, engagement, agility, these are all best value premises, and that's worked very successfully in Massachusetts, especially during COVID when we had a lot of emergency procurements, and these were the tenets of how we were able to achieve success there. Jenny out.
Hey Dustin, this is Jamie. I just have a quick follow-up question, Carol. You mentioned a good leader has qualities around change and implementing change. And I just want to, maybe you could share with us a little bit about your thoughts around change management within your own procurement team, right? So if you're implementing a change and your procurement team is having some struggles around that, how have you dealt with that in your career?
What comes to mind immediately, Jamie, is two projects that we tackled over the years. First was our first generation e-sourcing system, and then most recently in the last year, our second generation e-sourcing system. And I think in order for the staff to embrace that change, you need to involve them in the process. And so what we did with both of these projects right off the get-go was let them know what we were doing, why we were doing it, why it's important. And we created working teams. They would manage different categories. For example, with our most recent e-sourcing project, we had a communications team. They were the team that communicated with our staff, communicated with our stakeholders, communicated with the vendor, on key messages that had to be distributed throughout the project. We had a testing team that did all the testing of the implementation as we were coming on board. We had a vendor team, and this team was dedicated to ensuring the vendors had what they need to come on board. We also had a training team, and that team put together, with the help of our project management team of Civic, they put together all the training materials and conducted the training so that our staff had what we needed. We had a couple other teams, a document library team, and a few others that aren't coming to my mind right now. But we had probably 75 to 85% of our staff voluntarily join those teams during the project while doing their own regular work. So it naturally allowed them to understand what was happening, what was in store for them, embrace the change themselves so they can continue singing that song and delivering that same message and helping our users as they were onboarded. So I think staff involvement is a critical part of change, any project for that matter.
So Carol, since you're not familiar with the app, when people flash their mute buttons, that means they're clapping. So everybody clap for Jamie. See all these little
Awesome.
things you didn't know that you needed, right? So anybody else have a gem or want to chime in and ask Carol about her leadership in her long career with the Connecticut?
Hey, Carol, this is Christina with Civic Initiatives, and just congrats to you, and very excited for your next journey, and thank you for all your years of service. My question would be, how do you emphasize best skills and qualities in your team members? I mean, one of my mentors in the field, he always made sure that we were at least, a quarter of the time working in the areas that we actually enjoy doing, at the very least, because that just really, ignites passion and keeps passion going as far as, what your day-to-day work is. And so do you have any thoughts on that, just about managing and leading individuals into, how they can enjoy and excel in procurement?
Yes. Thank you, Christina. Good to meet you, and thank you for your kind words. And I apologize in advance. There's some construction going on in my house. So if you're a drill or something, that's why. And I'm trying. Hopefully you don't hear. So yeah, I think so when there's new opportunities, whether it's a new contract, a new project, an ask of us haven't done before, I generally put it out there to staff, and we get volunteers. And I think that is so critical when staff sees something that looks like an interesting project or something they want to do differently, or if someone leaves and we have, categories of work that need to be done, put it out there first. Anyone interested in volunteering to take on this? And sometimes that works out great because, as everyone knows in the procurement field, there's always the desired categories of work to be had. And some of them are not, some of them are more challenging and not so desirable. So that's one way of matching up talent and interest and keeping staff motivated. The other, I think, is just professional development. If they're doing something that they're not so enthused about and want to get somewhere different, I'm always encouraging professional development. We are fortunate to have resources from NASPO to help us with professional development. And then just having conversations with other senior leaders in the agency or they don't even have to be senior leaders, other key people within the agency who are doing something different. And sometimes that leads to opportunities that might not have been they've been aware of, and making introductions to people so they have more resources and connections and a network of people who can help them, guide them, and maybe get them to where they want to be.
So Jonathan, you're with the state of Louisiana. You guys have a fairly big shop, so I'm sure people, want to have opportunities to show that they can lead, and you need to give them opportunities to grow within the work while still getting the work done. So what thoughts do you have on how a procurement office can drive, opportunities to lead and to create leaders in the shop?
Well, again, this is Jonathan Walker of State, Louisiana. To build on what's been said, I think you have to ask the question is, what are people interested in doing? What are people's risk appetites and willingness to grow versus, preference to stay where they are? I can just speak from my own experience as well as what I've seen from others, but even from my own experience. There have been times in my career where I've wanted to be at the table for the sausage making, for the high stakes negotiations, for the legislative process, for the big, tricky, complicated, high stakes type procurement matters. And then there are other times in my career, prominent examples being right after I came out, or right before I went on paternity leave, and right after I came off of paternity leave, as well as when other stuff is going on, like disasters, where my appetite for that type of engagement varies. And I think we have to be mindful of that, people's personal circumstances can shape the extent to which they are looking to be heavily involved in those value-added special projects, or whether they're not. And just because somebody is or is not willing to do it at a certain time shouldn't be read as a lifetime yes or no on whether they'd be a good fit to it. We've been very surprised, very pleasantly surprised, some of the people who have been able to step up into leadership roles. And, I would have never predicted based on onesie-twosie interactions where it looked like they stepped back. But whenever you ask the question and keep asking the question, sometimes you can be very pleasantly surprised about who is willing to step, who is willing to be at the table, who wants to invest in their own growth and the growth of the office, the enterprise mission.
So, Christin, how did you come to your leadership role? Did you have people who gave you opportunities to grow in this space? And how have you tried to carry those lessons into the way that you run your shop?
Great question. Absolutely didn't make it here by myself, that's for sure.
And introduce yourself too.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Sure thing. Christin with the Shelby County Purchasing Office, Administrator of Purchasing here in Memphis, Tennessee. And like I was mentioning, definitely had mentors. And within my purchasing experience as a buyer, my manager and my supervisor were very key in making sure that I had opportunities to be innovative. When I saw things that could enhance the process or enhance the overall operations, they embraced that. And even if it was with suggestions on how it could be tweaked or implemented with more enhancements, they just gave that opportunity for me to be able to show my leadership, to be able to execute different things that helped the procurement process where I was. But I think most importantly, three key things that have always been preached to me when I got in my first leadership role was being fair, firm, and consistent. And so I always use those three things as my guiding tools, I'll say, as I'm in leadership, making sure that I am being fair about processes, engagement with people, making decisions from a firm perspective, of course, with the right analysis of the approach and plan that'll execute well, and then just being consistent across the board. So those things for me, I feel have been very key in being able to navigate change, or being able to manage relationships, or even being able to foster leadership within others that, report to me. So those would be my things. I did have one question, if I could, for Carol.
Oh, please. Yep.
Carol, I wanted to know, in your experience, how have you found it, or how did you find it best to navigate relationship with governing boards? And I'm trying not to use the word politics, but, in governing government agencies and procurement, you absolutely a lot of times have your commissions or your county, your councils. How did you navigate those relationships so that you could still do the work of procurement and just having a smooth relationship with those individuals to get projects done with no hiccups?
That's a really great question. Just in the past 10 years, there was a new state contracting standards board put together in the state of Connecticut, which is an oversight board. In my opinion, it was a reaction to some things that were going on in the state outside of the procurement division, but it was an effort to ensure there wasn't a lot of privatization going on, and that there was clean contracting, et cetera. And so right off the bat, I went to every one of their meetings, introduced myself, conducted myself with them as an ally who could support them, educate them, and help them get the answers they need. Many times those board members are not versed in the procurement world. They're not versed in a lot of the state regulations and statutes you have to deal with. So I took the educational approach and made an effort to, when they made assumptions on things that might have been happening, I'd either clear up the facts or offer to educate them on a particular topic. As a result, they come to me. They started coming to me for information and came to trust me as a reliable expert in the field. So I've had, while part of me feels, sometimes these boards handcuff you and put you in a position where you can't be as creative as you want to be. At the same time, if you take the approach I took, I felt like we were an asset to that and more of a partner to that board, despite their oversight mission.
Yeah, we talk about, how do you make procurement be a strategic asset, right? And I think that part of that conversation is about not simply executing the work of the transaction management, which is of course very important, but also understanding how executives that don't have as much connection to the daily grind and the work that's associated with procurement, but how they can view procurement as a way that expresses their priorities, because ultimately through procurement goes most of the budget. So there is importance in how you can build that leadership connection up and out. I mean, Carol, how did you find the ability to leverage your your chief administrative officer, who I know that you roll underneath one of them, and then also out into the rest of your cabinet as trying to make people understand procurement as more than simply checking the box on the purchasing function?
A lot of that entailed proactive communications. Our current commissioner is also the chief operating officer for the state, and very smart businessman and huge background, but government experience was new. So just making him comfortable with the laws that surrounded our work, why we did the things we would do, listen to his ideas of new approaches to things, and help him help him understand the business, so that we all were on the same page in terms of our mission and our vision and our objectives. It worked very well for Connecticut. Has had a seat at the table in our recent administration from the very get-go, and especially during the pandemic. And I truly believe because of this, your results are that much more effective and positive in terms of servicing your stakeholders and achieving your mission.
Yeah, so I think the key highlight that I'm hearing, Carol, especially from you, is communication, collaboration, and trust. And I think that has been a theme throughout these conversations. I do have one additional question, though, for you before I start crying drastically that you are retiring and I won't have the opportunity to have these lovely conversations with you. But I would just ask a question. Right, the last year has changed not only the entire world, but also how we just function on a daily basis. And I'm curious how you developed your leadership, I won't say develop, how you adapted your leadership style over the past year of your career versus the first 23 years in state service.
Oh, Jamie, that's a really good question, and a kind of a challenging question, but not only were we on the front line responding to the needs of the pandemic through our procurement work and working, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week to get what the state needed. But then we were thrown at home, and most of my staff initially didn't even have a laptop computer. They had to use their personal equipment to do the work, and use their personal cell phone to call vendors overseas, et cetera. But part of it, again, it was especially important that I had more frequent staff meetings, again, communication, and face to face, and we used Microsoft Teams, it's Zoom, whatever platform you're using. We had to have those regularly and get the pulse on people, how they were doing, how they were feeling, were they adapting. I made sure my management team and my supervisory team gave me a cue if someone was struggling, so we could get the help they needed or the resource they needed. We of course, Civic was extremely helpful to us in doing some new normal exercises, which helped the staff opened up and really prioritized what we were struggling with and where we needed some areas of focus. So that allowed us in the short term to develop some action steps to address those immediate challenges. Again, it's part of ensuring everyone was heard. And now a year later, we're still at home. Everyone has their own equipment. The whole world is getting used to communicating virtual. We do look forward to the day going back into the office periodically. And I won't be there because I'll probably be out camping or fishing. But I think there's a lot of lessons learned from the way the world turned in 2020. But in terms of the working world, I think we recognize that state workers can be productive in a telework situation. And, maybe a future schedule where we have a day or two in the office and a day or two at home, depending on your needs and what makes you productive, might be the new norm for us. So there's so many lessons learned. But again, communication, I had to up the communication, especially during the last year. It wasn't face-to-face being in the same room together, but we were face-to-face on a Zoom type call and on telephone calls frequently.
Yeah, Carol, I think that's such great. That's really good guidance. Dustin, I do have a hard stop at 1 o'clock today, so I am going to end at least my portion of the talk by just, Carol, I can't thank you enough for the leadership and the dedication that you've shown, not only to NASPO, but to the entire procurement community. I just have such tremendous respect for you and all of your leadership and guidance that you have imposed at NASPO. I personally will miss you so much. The road always leads north as it relates to camping. So come on up. Happy to have a lobster and share a fishing experience with you anytime.
Awesome, Jamie. I have 6 days booked early September up in Belfast, Maine. Hopefully our paths will cross. I'll make an appointment to connect.
Hey, look me up. That sounds great, Carol. Enjoy it. And thanks everyone for the call this week.
Yep. And, I sort of told Carol what we were doing. I basically did. I was not deceitful, but I didn't necessarily say everything we were doing. So it was a chance to make sure I would get you on the phone to thank you as well for your great sponsorship of Civic and the work that we've been able to do for you. And Lisa's on the Zoom call with me instead of in the Clubhouse. And I know that she's very dedicated to your projects and, cares for you guys a great deal. So you've been a great blessing to us as well. And there's no way I was going to let you just drift off into Price is Right and grocery shopping without coming in and letting us say how much we care about you.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad I wasn't in my pajamas today, and I'm glad I was ready to take these questions. It's so great to see everyone and hear from people in our own field. Thank you. I'll miss all of you, and I'm sure I'll stay in touch in some way.
Yep. So we're near the end of our of our guided portion where we're doing a recording. If you guys are online or on the Clubhouse app, please follow the Public Sector Innovators. We're hosting a discussion about leadership in a procurement office, and we're also celebrating Carol Wilson, who's retiring from the state of Connecticut after 20 plus years. So if any of you know Carol and want to jump up and say anything to her before we end this part of it, then feel free. And any one of my folks on stage, if you guys know Carol or have any chime-ins, then please feel free to capture it, and then we'll move into the question period. Jonathan, did you get much of a chance to work with Carol? I don't know if you guys cross paths very much.
Yes, we were on a couple of NASPO committees together, and we saw each other at exchanges, et cetera. And I won't repeat everything that's been said, but I'm going to miss Carol's, not only her leadership, but her example. That's just as important, I find, is not just having people that are willing to step up and actually be in the roles, which is critically important, but also people that show that the profession is worth being engaged in and worth taking seriously and worth pursuing as a passion, not just as a job. So I think Carol does a great job on all of those fronts.
So I'll close the recorded portion with a final question to Carol. So Carol, when you leave, you've left a shop of really dedicated people who really care about where Connecticut goes, and they're going to pick up that ball and keep running with it in new and different ways. So maybe talk about the leadership that you are leaving behind, and what you hope for them in the future.
Oh, yeah. I had a quick, what I did in the last week, I got with all our program teams as small groups and really just wanted to send positive vibes and motivational opportunities for them to keep they don't need me around to keep the vision and the mission and the objectives moving forward. They need to have the confidence to know that they can carry this on without me. And there will be a period of time where there's an interim director until my permanent replacement comes on in June. And I know that they're going to rally around that person and then the permanent replacement come June, and put their best foot forward, show them what they've got, and help that person get acclimated, and that person share their vision. Again, I emphasize the fact that it's while I've been there for a long time and they've always been used to me, it's really important that you get fresh blood in there every so often, new ideas, new vision, and it generates enthusiasm and new ways. There's many ways of looking at doing things, and not one way is always the correct way. So I encourage them to keep an open mind and rally around the new leadership.
Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent.